This Ag News Update brought to you by American Implement, indebted to the past, committed to the future. In a moment, Mike Zuzolo, Global Commodity Analytics and Consulting.
Would you like to see something done about high gas prices and low unemployment? Western Place Energy in Campus, Kansas is doing something about it. They're a proud part of Growth Energy, America's ethanol supporters, and they employ 38 people and will be adding more following the expansion. Ethanol fuel not only reduces the cost of regular gasoline, it's good for the environment and keeps money right here in the United States while supporting local rural jobs. Western Plains Energy, doing something for the future.
S&S Trailer Sales, with 2 locations in Ness City, Kansas, is where everybody goes to buy or rent trailers. They feature the all-new, all-aluminum Mauer grain trailer with all of the electric options, the easy-to-load detached trailers, and a huge stock of header trailers. At the West location, you'll find bumper poles, goosenecks, and oilfield specialty trailers, along with flat and utility beds for pickups. S&S Trailer Sales in Ness City and on the web, but remember, you do have to spell out the "and."
Joining us, Mike Zuzolo, Global Commodity Analytics and Consulting in Atchison. And Mike, as we are now kind of in the dead heat of summer, we're going to spend some time talking about the proteins. And boy, this cattle market, once kind of the slaughter facilities came back to almost online, we have not seen the cash price come back. Still a lot of concern that we're seen to be the dollars aren't getting back in the country.
Right. I think the biggest thing right now, Ken, and thanks for having me back, by the way, is the issue of the institutions. I think the cattle market is trying to go higher with the equities markets, and I think it'll continue to go higher with the equities markets, but we got to cut the weights back during this summer heat. And if we can do that, then there'll be more upside potential if the equities go higher. Otherwise, we'll probably try and go along with the ride, but not as much as we want. Like October fat cattle, for instance, I'd love to get above 110, get into that 111 level, and get into some hedges there. Why? Because of this COVID resurgence. And so I think we're at a situation where coming in after July 4th, with states like Texas looking at locking back down again, and seeing 8,000 cases a day or something like that in Arizona of hospitalizations, you're looking at a situation where our institutions, our colleges, our schools, our football stadiums, those are that's where the meat is bought, and that's where the meat is consumed. So I think we really got to be defensive coming into the fall and assume that we're going to have a resurgence. And so if we get higher prices, because weights drop and because the equities market, stocks keep going higher, take advantage of that and get some floors underneath you, if you ask me.
Well, one of the things that has somewhat been lost when kind of us, those that aren't experts, talk about and try to figure out is we're really learning the impact that the institutional buying, especially the schools and the sports, we're not selling hot dogs this summer. Mike, there's you look at the cold storage reports, the freezers are overfull. We're getting roped to keep them, closed. And with this idea of the restaurants, kind of going, but not really in that full force. We're still eating a lot of hamburger, but maybe not a lot of steaks, not those other cuts. And so the question is, obviously we don't think we know how long this thing lasts, but what are we to do?
Well, I think the first thing we got to do is get the retail prices down, because if we've got unemployment of 11 to 15% going into the fall, we're not going to be able to afford $16 and $18 steaks. Even if we can get them, we're not going to be able to afford $16 or $18 steaks. That's been the most disappointing feature to the supply chain that I've seen the last 3 months, Ken. And I get it. I know that there's a lot of AI. I know there's a lot of robots. I know there's a lot of packaging machines that got to be paid for because we have so much automation in these packing houses nowadays. But the consumer cannot tolerate those kind of high retail prices. So to me, that's the beginning point. If I start seeing those grocery store prices drop, then I can start saying, okay, even if COVID resurges, we can pick up a little bit of demand off of lower prices.
cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception: keeping electricity affordable.
Wheatland Electric, delivering energy for life, your Touchstone Energy Cooperative.
When you've had a best friend for over 50 years, you develop a trust. And the Scott Co-op has been a trusted rural friend since 1957. A co-op keeps money in the area, doing business for and with their members. And that helps keep their hometown thriving with keeping money in the community. Scott Co-op is not just an elevator. It's the rural way of doing business. So, when you see an elevator, remember your friends at Scott Co-op.
Well, it's a situation that, we saw some expansion. Will we see, some of that possibly back off? Heifer retention maybe won't be quite so strong, or breeding animals. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where if we continue to have strong numbers, but the demand simply isn't there, or can't get there, we haven't solved anything.
You're right. And that puts us right back to where we are in the grains. It's all about supply then. It's about weather. It's about higher hay prices, tougher forage conditions, and dropping those weights. That will kill the expansion in the cattle market, and it'll happen relatively quickly because we're right in the heat of the summer now, and it's really hot this year. We haven't experienced this kind of heat for several years now in this part of the country.
Pork trade, it seems like it's all about China, but we have seen some other countries somewhat play into there, but really, Mike, over the last several weeks, once, when the COVID thing first started happening, we had a lot of different news items about pork. The last few weeks, there really hasn't been hardly any news or anything that has moved the market one way or the other, and they don't seem to be playing very much with what's going on in the cattle complex.
No, and I think that makes sense from a standpoint that, Ken, we're at a stage where at 45-cent futures and at 20-cent live hogs, we've done enough damage to the prices. I'm not saying that we can't go lower, but we shouldn't go lower, even with the oversupply we still have, because we are picking up demand at these prices. That's where the beef and the pork really differ at the retail level. And I think the pork's winning the game. And I think they're winning the game as well at the meat counter because there's not as much poultry around. And if there is, the cuts are a lot higher. Chicken quarters and legs are much, much higher than they should be right now for this time of year. So I think pork's getting the demand that it needs given the supply. But I continue to hear back east in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, the larger producers I work with in hogs still looking to cut their supplies, get their wean pigs down because they're losing $5,000 to $8,000 a truckload, depending on how many truckloads and how many loads and who they go to with those loads every month. So it's a loss still, and they're still trying to liquidate, but they're trying to do it with dignity. And so as long as I keep hearing that, it tells me the expansion phase is over.
But these input costs, I mean, as far as to be able to feed both cattle and hogs, they should be able to place these inputs at a little better price. Obviously, if you're a corn farmer, you don't want to hear that, but I have a grave concern about what that price might be across the scale at harvest time for corn that obviously can be fed for cattle and hogs.
Well, and this is a big point. I talked to the head of NASS in Washington, D.C. about the acreage report, specifically about those acres and whether they can come back, that left to be planted category, because they supposedly incorporated that into the planted acres. He said, we incorporated it because we believe the farmers got those corn and bean acres planted. So those acres are off the table. So I'd be more worried as a livestock producer of higher cash feed prices for the next 3 months until we actually get into the combines. Then I'd be worried about lower feed prices, because look where we came from in the corn and meal and bean prices before that acreage report. So I'm a livestock feed hedger at this stage of the game, especially if we miss these next rains in the next 7 days.
All right, Mike. Well, as always, appreciate your insights. And before we let you go, we've got to talk just a little bit about some of these international situations, what is and what isn't happening. We continue to see the saber rattling with Japan. USMCA is now fully engaged, but we continue to hear kind of little whispers and side notes that nobody's really happy. So that might be a good thing, that we all are just going to have to get along. But there are some concerns based on some things that maybe aren't ag related that you and I focus a lot on, some of those outside influences that could cause some issues even with our closest trading partners.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because, Ken, whether you're looking at the 1930s or the 1980s or today, history would suggest that the more issues we have to take on with a pandemic and with the disease, the more we're going to protect our own people in our own country economically and our own jobs. And so we're not going to be essentially going after a lot of international trade pacts. We're going to try and keep our own jobs at home and our own demand at home. And that means we'll be a little bit more nationalistic than we typically have been the last 20 or 30 years. Like we always talk about, though, watch that dollar. Watch the dollar as a safe haven bid. If the market gets nervous, traditionally what they do is buy gold, which that's now a 10-plus year high at this stage of the game, banging on $1,800 an ounce. And the market has recently also come in and bought the U.S. dollar as a safe haven. And so as long as that dollar stays tame, then I'm not so worried about what's going on with our trading partners because the flow of goods will happen. But if that dollar takes a big jab up like it did in 2000, 2001, that's really going to hurt.
Well, Mike, folks want to talk with you, gain some of your insights. How can they reach you?
Best way is to go to the website, Ken, globalanalytics.biz or globalcomresearch.com, and sign up for a 2-week trial and see what the analysis I send out looks like.
Always great to talk to you, Mike. Thanks.
Thanks so much for having me, Ken.
Mike Zuzolo, Global Commodity Analytics and Consulting from Atchison, Kansas, has joined us. Stay with us. We'll have more in a moment.
Day and night till the job is done, Teeter is the one that works for you. Fields of green reaching toward the sun, Teeter is the one that works for you. Teeter is the one, Teeter is the one that works for you. Teeter Irrigation, your source for water management.
Wolfter Construction and Irrigation has been around a long time, and a lot of folks have trusted them to design, build, and service all sizes of commercial and on-farm storage for grain and equipment. Wolfter is also known for their outstanding irrigation division, where they stock a complete selection of nozzles, regulators, drops, gear drives, electrical, and structure components. Looking for an electric motor? Wolfter has a large selection in single and 3-phase. Next time, reach out to the pros who have decades of experience at taking care of business the right way. Wolfter Construction and Irrigation.
1030 KBUF brings you agriculture information every market day, ag news, markets, weather, and more. You can also be social with us online on Facebook as well as Twitter. I'm Ken Rahjes. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching.